Among the guests at Westminster Abbey were representatives of the many charities for which the Queen was patron. Claire Pelham is Chief Executive of the Epilepsy Society. I called up with her just after the service and asked if there was any point whereby she felt emotionally overwhelmed.
I did tear up, actually. I managed to maintain my composure till almost the end of the service, and then the Archbishop of Canterbury gave the commendation in preparation for the final part of the service, and he said, "Go forth, O Christian soul," and that is, even now that makes me feel quite overwhelmed, because the part of her late Majesty that we don't always bring to top of mind is how much her Christianity was central to her life and how it informed all that she did. I mean, in supporting the Epilepsy Society, I am certain it came from her deep-rooted Christian faith and her desire to do her best for all her subjects in whatever their challenges. And she lived her Christian faith, and somehow that phrase really rang home.
Did that surprise you, your reaction to that? After all, the music, the choir, there was so much beauty and emotion in the service, wasn't there?
There was. And yet what was surprising to me about it was it had all the form and structure of a very ceremonial occasion, but all the spirit of a family occasion, if that makes sense, in the sense that people were behaving very much as if Her late Majesty was part of our extended family, and people were overcome by emotion at different points, when perhaps a line in "The Lord's my shepherd" struck home to them, perhaps reminded them of a bereavement of their own. And so it was both an amazingly formal national and international day of mourning, but also a very personal and family occasion, because we sang the hymns that we all know and have sung so many times at family occasions of our own. "The Lord's my shepherd" and "Love Divine," very familiar and well-loved hymns that everyone joined in with, of course.
Could you sense around you, Claire, that there were moments where people were upset, that a raising of a hand with a handkerchief, or perhaps the suppressed sniffle from someone?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. What was interesting is, of course, many of the people there were people who are used to significant occasions and who have great self-control, but I certainly saw one of the Lord Lieutenants overcome, and there were members of the armed forces that were near me that I could see were feeling very deeply. It's obviously no small thing to be willing to give up your life for your Queen and country, and obviously her passing was hugely significant to members of the armed forces. It was. I don't think there was anyone there who wasn't moved. We all showed it in our different ways, I think.
And where you were sat, was that an area that was put aside for the charities that Her Majesty the Queen had been a patron of?
So I was seated by the Great West Door, and it was that part of the nave was for what was, I think, rather appropriately called the congregation, and so among my neighbours were members of the armed forces, some charities like ours, for whom at the Epilepsy Society, for whom the Queen had been our patron, and there were also members of the public who'd been honoured with the MBE in the recent honours list, and so it was a wonderful mix, actually. And what seemed odd about it is sometimes you go to an occasion where the great and the good are on a top table and everybody else is on the bottom table, but it almost felt the other way round, that the greater focus was on the more humble members of the congregation, and we felt absolutely front and central. And knowing the Queen's attention to detail as I do, from all the support that she's given to us at the Epilepsy Society, I'm sure that was part of her design for the service.
During COVID, Claire, Her Majesty sent a letter didn't she? Which began as patron of the Epilepsy Society. I send my best wishes to all those associated with the charity. She then went on to write, I've been continually impressed by the excellent work of your staff in providing vital care for residents and members across the United Kingdom. What did that mean to people who were and are at the Epilepsy Society to receive that letter from Her Majesty in 2020?
It was absolutely wonderful, and all the better because we could make it known. So a year or two earlier, she'd done us a great good deed, and we had been asked to keep it private. So it was amazing that we could make known her support. So the late Queen had had a letter from a young girl called Ellie, who was 10 years old, whose best friend had died of epilepsy, asking how she could help for children with epilepsy. And Her Majesty had forwarded it to us because she was patron of our charity, and she had gone on to support the work that we'd done to put Ellie's letter as the forefront of our Christmas appeal, which raised £40,000 going towards making better lives and better treatments for people with epilepsy. So behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, the Queen has always been our supporter, and we value it so much because of the stigma that is often attached to epilepsy, that she was very forward in her championship of our cause. And of course, we shall miss her hugely.
And lastly, Claire, as you were filing out of Westminster Abbey, what was going through your mind?
Sadness. It is a terribly sad day. Odd thought, we'd just sung the national anthem, and it was the first time I'd ever sung God Save the King. That felt like a page turning, and also a feeling that we had a network of warmth and support from all around the world. That's what I think came out of the procession for me. How many heads of state and heads of different religions were there to offer us support in our grief and to help us move forward.
Claire Pelham there from the Epilepsy Society. At 2:30 we will join the BBC News coverage of events in Windsor, where a committal service will be held for the Queen at St George's Chapel there. 5 Live's Tony Livesey will be part of that programme, and he is in Windsor now. Tony, good afternoon.
Nihal, hello, and yes, welcome to Windsor. I'm on the Long Walk. It's an extraordinary scene here. I'll explain a little bit about what I can see and just a little history lesson here. So the Long Walk is a 2.6 mile long avenue that stretches from Windsor Great Park right to Windsor Castle. It's lined now by servicemen and women the whole way. This is the procession route for the Queen's coffin when it finally reaches Windsor. The last time I was here was for Harry and Meghan's wedding, and there weren't half as many people, and obviously the mood was very different. Today there are thousands upon thousands of people lining the route either side of the Long Walk. The crowds, Nihal, they're 20, 30, 40 deep in places. Everybody wants to play their part in what will be the final stage of the Queen's public funeral procession. She will then there'll be a committal service in Windsor, and that will be the end of the day's events. People have gone to great lengths. Some people have been queuing since 3 a.m. this morning to get the best spots. You're about to hear a band marching past me very shortly, and my next two guests might be able to identify the regiment because they are ex-service. I have 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 ex-service. I